Welcome to the Soul of Medicine. Welcome, everybody, to the Soul of Medicine podcast. We're so excited for our guest today, Lynnette Duncan, who is near and dear to my heart as well as Rob's, and so lovely to have you.
It's so great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's good to see you both again.
So good to see you, Lynnette.
Yeah, thanks.
So let me introduce you. So as I said, our guest today is Lynnette Duncan. She's a self-empowerment coach and spiritual guide, and she uses the ancient tools of astrology to reveal the sacred energy imprint of the soul. She believes the astrological chart reveals your unique cosmic imprint, which is encoded with your evolution through these times, and she helps support those in search of entering that unique quantum field where support of living an abundant life prevail. I love that. And self-love is the most important concept Lynnette teaches because it's so vital to our well-being and our ability to thrive. Lynnette believes that through a self-love practice that we are finally able to connect with our inner being, aka our inner child, and heal the aspects of us that have been rejected and not allowed a healthy expression. Welcome, Lynnette.
Welcome. Thank you. Yeah. So excited to be able to talk about self-love today.
I love
Very
that.
cool.
And that's such an awesome topic. And I know that when we were talking, I had a difficult time. You kept saying that to me, and I was like, I am. And, it takes a little bit to really understand what that is or embody that, if you will.
Yes.
Conceptually, we think, oh, it's the manis and the pedis and the massages, or I went on vacation, and that's so not it, and at all. And I know that you'll talk quite a bit of what self-love really means. And for me, it was even the minutia, day-to-day, moment by moment of even how I speak to myself or judge myself. I didn't really think that even was a part of self-love, but how that occupied most of my brain. And that I think you mentioned something about flagellation. It felt like that. It was a daily flagellation of, when you look in the mirror, I can't stand my hair, my belly, or I can't believe you forgot. Those kinds of things that we don't realize really diminish ourselves, right?
Yep.
So what inspired you to focus on self-love in your work?
I was going through kind of a dark night of the soul. I hit my Chiron return, which happens around 50 for every person. And you really have to take stock of your life. And I wasn't really doing what I wanted to do. I had been trained in astrology in my 20s, but I wasn't doing that. I was doing real estate and property management. I was working 70 plus hours a week, and I was exhausted. And I just knew I'd been a single mom, and I'd been raising kids and always working. And I just knew there had to be something else. So I did go through a dark night of the soul, and I actually found Matt Kahn, who is a really wonderful proponent of self-love. And he's written a couple of books, and he's on YouTube. And I found his work to be just remarkably brilliant and easy. And he works at a spiritual level, and it spoke to me on a spiritual level. And I just started practicing. So a lot of what I talk about and how I teach self-love is through my own experience, but Matt's also a really great resource. And that dark night of the soul, I was really depressed, and I really, in some ways, technically had what I would call a nervous breakdown. And so I just started practicing, and I really pulled myself out of a really dark place. And I'd been in a dark place kind of my whole life. So it really changed my mind, and it allowed me to step into my power and start really doing what I wanted to do and what I love doing. And it really changed my life. So it became central to the work that I was doing. And I'm an astrologer, but I teach self-love. It's almost interesting how they've come together. But on a spiritual level, I see a lot of people that don't really understand the concept, like you mentioned, and they don't quite get there. So I find it to be a really free and easy healing tool for most people.
That's so profound. And you mentioned the Chiron return and that midlife crisis, if you will, that transition. A lot of our patients are in that transition. And I find that it's either you get it or you don't. You have the opportunity in the portal to come into this journey of self-love, because that's really what it is all about, right? And that's why it's so primary in your work. Or you find yourself down another rabbit hole and, all the physical issues. And I definitely think that health and wellness is directly related to self-love or dis-ease, if you will. Yes. Okay, could you define self-love and how it differs from self-care or self-esteem?
Self-love and self-esteem go together. Actually, self-love is the component that accentuates self-worth. So that was what I was missing. That's what I find a lot of people are missing. We live in a sort of a dualistic nature with ourselves. We have the internal voice, and we have the thing that we don't say outside, the personality or the aspect of ourselves that we don't really project into the world. The one that is more scared and conflicted and negative. So we live these dualities all the time, and it's very hard to bring them together, because that negative self-talk and that negative self-voice is really what drives even negative emotions. And you're not even aware that the negative thinking that you have is creating a physical effect. And when you think negative emotions, or when you think negative thoughts, you'll feel a negative emotion. They go together. And so you can either catch the negative thought, or you can catch when the emotion doesn't feel good and realize what you're thinking. So self-love is about being kind and gentle and patient and loving with yourself, and forgiving and being gentle. So we often think that that negative voice is going to make us better, that it's going to make us be more on time or more efficient or more loving or all the things. But it actually, can't work at a physical or even spiritual level when we're in the mind too much. So what we do with self-love is we drop into the heart, and we focus on being gentle with the part of ourselves that has endured a lot of things, who's survived a lot of things. And that is a game changer, because we're the only person that really knows what our experience has been from birth. Our parents have raised us, and we've had siblings and friends, but we're the one that has been coping with whatever our childhood was like. So in some ways, we have to go back and rescue that little person and be really kind and gentle with them, because I found that the inner child keeps us from doing a lot of good things in life. It'll wreck relationships. It will keep us from stepping into truth and power, because we're so afraid. It fuels codependency when we don't have self-love. So self-love is really simple in the sense that the most important thing is you've got to be aware of your negative self-talk. You've got to be aware that voice is creating an aura or an environment that you live in all the time. That's the first important step. And then beyond that, it's really the action of how we put our hand on our heart, say, I love you to ourselves. We notice when we're in what I call emotional portals, or when we're in distress, or we're depressed, or we're sad, or we're grieving, or we're upset, or we're angry. Those are emotions that we can enter our heart and just send love to ourselves. It's really interesting because it is a technique. It's really hard, like UK, when we talk about it, it's different from talking about it as opposed to doing it. And it's hard to describe how to do it, because really you're creating a session with yourself. You're really just getting to know that part of you that feels upset and disappointed and worried and scared. And we try to override that. And if we can just send love to those parts of us that are feeling really distressed, without worrying about how we're going to solve the problem or how we're going to take care of this or that, and we just really love the part of us that's active, then we notice longer gaps of time where we're not upset and angry and in distress. We have more peace of calm, more pieces of calm, and the timelines stretch out a little bit. So we notice the more we self-love that we have more peace for longer periods of time. So I don't know if that helps, if that describes it well, but yeah, it's kind of an interesting process, because the hardest thing is about really working with your inner being. And that means you've got to really acknowledge yourself and acknowledge how your little person what they've coped with, what they've survived, and really be gentle with that part. And all you've got to do is send love to that part. That's it. It's that simple. It's not really a hard thing, but people will struggle with, because we live in such a separated state between our inner being and our outer being. So it requires some meditation or quiet time or just time to yourself. Because I find that when you start practicing self-love, if you're not doubled over in pain, crying, and grieving, you're probably doing it wrong. And a lot of people just don't want to go there. You know, it's very hard to reconnect to some of our pain, but when you can reconnect to that emotional portal where you're connecting with how abandoned you felt or rejected you felt, and you can love yourself in that moment, then you can begin to heal.
I think that's so profound in how you describe the inner child and sort of that present adult person.
Yeah.
And when patients come to see me, a lot of them have a lot of anxiety or sadness or whatever they're experiencing. And the understanding that that inner child is the one that's getting activated, the nervous system is being activated. It's such a light bulb moment,
Yes, it is.
you know, and going in and talking to, I call my inner child LK, little K,
Yes.
or, you know, LR, little Rob, or LL, little Lynnette, you know. And when I started journaling and speaking to her, what is it that you need? Or you're okay, you're safe, you're loved. I mean, every moment of the day when I can feel my adrenals going nuts or my nervous system going crazy, it's almost an immediate, with the hand on the heart, down regulation of the nervous system, which I was going to ask you why self-love was important for well-being, but there is this connection, you know, of the cortisol going high and then a lot of inflammation, connection to the vagus nerve, all the things.
Yes.
And, you know, a lot of people say, well, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm in a good place in your life. Yes. And there's still the little person, the inner child who's still activated inside of you that still needs the comfort and the healing. Mm-hmm. And because they can't understand that nothing in present time is really activating or shouldn't be activating. And it's still that wounded little child needing all the things that she or he didn't get.
I think we get frozen in time when we have experiences as children that we don't know how to cope with. Maybe we don't have somebody that can really help us through it or that is compassionate with us. And we do the best we can. And we spend a lot of years adjusting to that kind of reality. And we think we can just bypass it. And the truth that I've noticed is that we can't. I work with a lot of people that are also adults that if you miss that piece, there's a certain level that you can't get to. What I love about self-love is that when you're connecting to your heart and you put your hand on your heart and you say, I love you to yourself, and you're having a moment with yourself, you're connecting those pieces together and your intuition goes up. You become more intuitive. You become more aware of your heart. You become more aware of your emotions. You can notice a distance between a reactive sort of, tendency to just get some breath and some space so that you can understand what part of you is reacting or is reactive rather than just reacting and then beating yourself up later. So you're just continuing this really negative cycle with yourself. So the hand on the heart and the breaths, the deep breaths that reset the vagus nerve, being willing to be in that emotional portal and just taking care of yourself in those moments can be really profound. They can really change your life. And I find that self-love brings peace. It brings peace and longer moments of peace. It also allows us to it gives ourselves permission to live the life that we want to live rather than the life that we might be living.
We were talking to a psychotherapist a few weeks ago, and that space in between, is that window of tolerance between hyperactivation of the nervous system and hypo. Yeah, that space, how do we increase that window? So you mentioned things like daily practices of meditation and journaling. Could you share some other daily practices that you do or that our audience could begin to use?
Well, I have a 6-part process with self-love, and noticing the negative self-talk is the most important thing to do. And so it's good to have a journal. It's good to have a journal and notice, even writing things down about the ways that we attack ourselves and the negative thoughts that we think. A lot of us will look in the mirror and, like you said, okay, we have this whole dialogue, right, that goes on in our head as we're looking at all the flaws. We very rarely will look in the mirror and say, you look beautiful today, or I love your eyes, or I love this shade on you, or I love your skin. So the negative self-talk, until we really understand that the negative self-talk is creating a loop in our brains, creating a pattern. And it's almost a loop that, it's there for a lot of reasons, but the negative self-talk is really important. The next step would be to really understand and learn how to direct love to the self. The reason that I say that it will double you over if you're doing it right is because when you connect to your inner child and you as an adult can see how much you struggled, you instantly have compassion for that child. And it's almost, in a way, it gives you information about why you are the way you are, why you do the things you do, why you've sabotaged relationships or jobs or opportunities. So the complex part of it is sending love to the self. And I love to just do that every morning. I love to just wake up and acknowledge myself and just be with myself. And if I'm in a period of time where I'm struggling with changes or things that make me sad or make me afraid or, activate my nervous system, I may wake up with thoughts and racing thoughts. I've dealt with a lot of anxiety in my life and CPTSD and all kinds of things. And I find that it just settles me. It grounds me. So there's a lot of different things that we can do, but the most important thing that we can really notice is that negative self-talk and catching yourself in that moment. And even if before you go deep into the process of self-love, if you can catch that negative thought and say, cancel, clear, and put your hand on your heart and just repeat an affirmation that's maybe opposite of what you've just said to yourself, that can do wonders too, because what you're doing is you're rewiring your brain, different neural pathways. And saying cancel clear will literally work, especially if you replace it with an affirmation. And the more you can do that, and the more you can notice and catch yourself, because the negative self-talk is so rote, it's so ingrained in us that it's the most important part. So those are two things that I do. Well, really, for me, it's just about catching myself. I've been in a lot of transition, so it's about the one thing I've noticed about some of the transitions that I'm in right now is that my self-love practice has allowed me to take one on the chin and just keep going. It doesn't sideline me the way that it used to. I feel hopeful and I feel good about who I am. Self-love is really the component, I believe, that has helped me to establish self-esteem and self-worth. I remember before I started doing this work, I didn't understand how people had good self-esteem. Like, how do you get that? Where does that come from? Like, who's responsible for that? Is it my fault that I don't have good self-esteem? Like, I didn't really understand it. So self-love helped me to validate myself. That's really the biggest component for self-love. Because when you start to validate yourself, and you start to understand why you're upset about something, you don't need another person to validate that, but you're getting in touch with what it is that you're upset about. And when you can validate that, it helps you to set boundaries. It helps you to be clear about where you need those boundaries. A lot of times when we get upset, it's because a boundary's been crossed or we've given away too much of ourselves. And so self-love brings you back. It validates you, so you don't need that validation from another person, and then you can move forward in that relationship. So there's quite a bit to it. It's simple. You just have to be consistent. I find that beyond the deep practice of just meeting yourself and loving yourself and opening up those emotional portals, when I was doing it, I had a lot of repressed memories come up. So there was a lot that was coming up, and I was very overwhelmed by what was coming into my reality. But the more that I loved myself, the more I was able to really let go of a lot of just idiosyncrasies that I'd had for years and years and years. And it also helped me to see that my boundaries were broken. I didn't have boundaries as a result. And it helped me to really be compassionate and loving with the person that had survived certain things. And I was more clear. So self-love, and even just any attention that we can pay to our inner being, is going to give us more clarity about who we are and what we need. And then we need to be able to follow through with that and validate that. And that gives us a lot of balance. It brings a lot of balance into our life. It even helps us to be more compassionate and patient with other people. When we're more compassionate and patient with ourselves, we become more compassionate and patient with people. And that's one of the biggest benefits, I feel, because you create that space. You create that space, and it gives you permission to wait and not respond, and to be able to come to a conversation or a difficult moment with more openness. When you have the capacity to be with yourself and to hold yourself, you're going to have more compassion with other people. So I just find that it improves everything. And I find that when we're not beating ourselves up, our self-esteem improves. There's a lot of components here.
It's interesting when I say, particularly to women, and it's about this practice that you're talking about. They're like, I don't know how to say that. And when they have children, and then I say, well, what would you tell your kid, your daughter, your son, if they were going through that? And then they have the answer. Well, I would hug them. I would ask them what's wrong. I would spend some time inquiring about that. It's like, see, you know how to do that for your own child, or grandchild, and that we need to sort of see ourselves as one of your children or one of your grandchildren and start there. That was a big aha. It's for myself. It's like, I know how to parent my kids, and I know how to mother them through that. So why don't I do it for myself?
Well, we don't think of it, though. It is reparenting ourselves. It is. It's giving ourselves what we needed that we maybe didn't get, or that our parents maybe didn't know how to give us, or didn't know what was wrong. In my case, my parents had no idea what happened to me. So I can't fault them. There was no flaw there, but I had to go back and rescue her. And when I talk about having sessions with myself, when you're in these emotional portals and you start to feel the pain that you maybe felt as a child, I scooped up my little girl and I put her right in my heart. And that, in a way, was protection, but it was also reparenting her and connecting her again. So I find that my process has been really creative. I'm very creative with how I do this work. And I think that everybody needs to do whatever works for them. But for me, it's almost like when I started really doing it, I noticed that different versions of me would show up at different ages. I had a very wounded little infant, and then I had a teenage, rebellious person, and the awkward stage growing up. I noticed that it's almost like that movie Sybil. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie where she has all those multiple personalities. It was almost like that. I kept meeting myself at different ages because I noticed that my little girl at different ages needed different things from me. I first met the one that was the most wounded, which was the very little girl, the very infant, tiny person. And then it brought back memories, which was really powerful because I didn't realize that was going to happen. But self-love to me I was able to retrieve. It was almost like being your own shaman. I was able to rescue all of those pieces and bring them back into my heart. And it created a lot of closure for me. I didn't need apologies or from anybody else. I was able to really just navigate from that space of just a deeper understanding, and it also, again, it gives you a deeper understanding of the self and what another person may have been going through in their timeline as well. So yeah, I do believe in reparenting. That's a good way to describe it.
I think that's so beautiful. And that we actually have that ability to do that and develop that relationship to the different parts of ourselves in the past. It makes one go more inward and connect and attune to our own needs. So I think that's really wonderful. Rob, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I thought it was fascinating, Lynnette, how you said as you started practicing self-love, that's when issues would emerge.
Yeah.
And, would you say it's a way where the body kind of prepares itself and then it's finally ready to step into it? Because, I'll compare it to like traditional or conventional medicine, right? So we're dealing with issues. Instead of self-love, we take an antidepressant or something like that, which actually we don't feel. So we're not in a preparation state for that journey. So it seems like self-love is actually a tool to actually step into where we need to go, as uncomfortable as it might be.
Yes, I found that there were things that I could never have probably retrieved had I not been in a gentle place with myself. It was interesting because the more that I did it, it felt a little disjointed at first. But the more I did it, one path led to another path, led to another path, led to another path. And it helped me in self-understanding. It helped me understand why I would do the things I did. And then it also helped me be compassionate and loving with myself for why I was built that way and why I did the things I did. So what I noticed about self-love is that that needed to be there first. I don't know that I could have had the memories without having something to work with. You know, I know a lot of people that do traditional psychotherapy and stuff, but I work with a lot of people with self-love that's not taught, and it's not something that you go into the portal of the self. And so a lot of people can still remain sort of fractured if they're not working with the inner being. So what I really noticed was, Rob, was that one memory led to the reasons why I did other things. And then as I was putting that all together, certain experiences and relationships and certain things started to piece together. I started just pulling all the pieces together the more that I self-loved, because I was able to hold the capacity of myself finally. 100%.
Very cool. Thank you.
What you're saying is, I mean, there has to be some presence of that we actually self-criticize, and that we're saying it, like you said, it was such this rote thing, this normal thing. Sometimes it feels more familiar of the criticism than it would be to say, oh, I love myself. Good job. I'm beautiful. Those kinds of things. I remember doing this one exercise in yoga teacher training, and we had to go around the room and whisper to each person in the circle what you wish you would have heard as a child, right? And so there are probably like 20 people in the circle, and they would say, you're beautiful, you're smart, you're wonderful. And I was crying the whole time, right? And it was like, what are you saying? It didn't feel familiar, and it didn't feel normal. I could barely receive it. It was what my heart wanted to receive, and I'm sure my inner child wanted to receive, but it was pretty traumatizing to hear that, and the disconnection of those words and those affirmations and how I saw myself, and what kinds of words I actually identified with. Because I would identify more with, you didn't do that well enough, or you got to do that better. Can you move faster? Why did you get that grade? You know what I mean? That felt more familiar. I'm laughing now, but it was kind of sad.
I mean, a lot of us can't receive love. We push people away. We sometimes seek out the most terrible people for us, and it's all just a pattern. We tend to repeat what we know. So in order to break the pattern, when you start loving yourself, and one of the things that I do that was taught to me is, when you're in a self-love practice, you don't say, I love myself. You say, I love you. You're talking to yourself. I love you. So you want to keep those comments. I love you is something that we say to other people. I love myself keeps you in a separation, in a sense. So when you say I love you, you send that love directly to yourself. And I think it was interesting, your story about how emotional you were when that happened, because that was your little girl being very active, noticing all the ways that you didn't hear those things. And that's the key, is that when you notice how desperate or how emotional it makes us, that's a wonderful emotional portal to work with, because your little girl was very active in that moment. And she was who you were dealing with. She was the one that was in that room at the time.
It makes so much sense as you're chronologically older, and, this little girl or little boy is still exists. It's so tender and it's so sweet, and just, it even feels different knowing that we could reparent her or have the protection. I think safety is such a big thing too, for me anyway. And that activates my nerves. It's so primal. It's like, you're okay, you're safe. And it's like, no, I literally can create safety in my own life.
Yes.
Right now, I don't need now all the barriers or the people or the words of affirmation to create my own safety. And that was a big thing when we were working together. Mm-hmm. And even with working in relationship with Rob, even, it was, and you told me he can't create that safety. And I think sometimes as women, we want that. We need that. We need somebody else to validate or create, a physical safety barrier, like being strong and big, or like, you talk to them, they're being mean to me, or, aren't you supposed to, that damsel in distress, like, aren't you supposed to save me? And it's not like we're necessarily right now needing to ball bust it, but it's just like, no, I'm okay. Like, I can create choices or make choices in my life that create the safety, so say, for instance, it's, I can do this, but these things need to be in place. I can be in a relationship with these people, provided that, these things need to be in place. Is that kind of also what you're talking about?
Yeah. I mean, I had terrible boundaries. And one of the things that I really noticed doing the work was that it helped me to understand myself on a deeper level and what I needed. What kind of boundaries I needed, what I wasn't going to tolerate. It also really increased my intuition. Now, I'm very intuitive by nature, but self-love really heightened all of those abilities, because the inner being is where the intuition is. So, the red flag, I was always the one that ignored the red flag. I'm not alone there. But when I started practicing self-love, I would feel the flag and I would honor that, because I created space. I created space and validation for myself. So when I would have an internal hiccup or a moment or a realization of something that was being triggered, I would always stop and acknowledge that first. And that would give me clarity about what I actually needed. Maybe I need space. Maybe I don't need to respond right now. I can articulate that I need space rather than leave and block someone or, ghost somebody. But I could articulate that, and then I could come back to it, and I could give myself as much time as I needed to do that. And it's really, self-love is about giving yourself permission. It's just about honoring who you are and what you need and how you need for it to be. What I found is that self-love doesn't really make us more selfish. We're more selfish when we aren't taking care of the little girl or the little boy, because the little girl and the little boy become selfish. They are fighting for their existence. So when we give that space, we become more playful. We become more curious. We become more pliable. We can make changes. We can listen more deeply. We can feel into our bodies, and we can communicate that response. So I just find that it heightens our awareness quite a bit.
One thing that I love about you is the way that you do communicate your boundaries. I mean, and as an empath and a sensitive, that's what we're always afraid of, like being mean to somebody when we establish our boundaries or say that we don't want something or need something. And, you taught me to say, well, this is my preference.
Yep.
Right. You have beautiful words that you say and have tried to teach me anyway. I don't know that I've mastered my compassionate boundary saying, but or this is my preference, or noticing what I need in the moment. I noticed that in my children, they're just like, no, or no, thank you. They don't have any attachment to, they just don't want to do it, or I'm busy right now. So could you, help us with some verbiage, of some of the things that you say around boundaries or establishing boundaries, particularly for those of us who are quite sensitive and empathic, like you said?
The self-love piece will help you retain or create vocabulary as well. But when you're validating yourself, preference is something that is important. What happens when we're empaths? Many of us are highly sensitive and we don't recognize that. I work with a lot of empaths that don't realize that they're empathic. And part of the challenge with being an empath is that you can feel another person's energy. You don't want to disappoint them. You don't want them to be upset. You don't want them to be mad. You don't want their disapproval because you can feel that. And so you'll do anything not to feel that from another person. So having an awareness that you're an empath, perhaps like many people are, and you're feeling not only your feelings, but maybe you're also feeling the feelings of another person. It can be hard to make that distinction. So I think, sometime I'm trying to think of phrases. I don't know that I can really come up with those. I think that speaking in I am terms, I feel, just being able to speak about what you need in the moment of something, I need a moment or I need some space, and articulating again through the validation of your own center, what it is that you need in that moment and just articulating it the best way that you can. It's a little bit awkward always, but I find that self-love brings courage. And I think courage is the thing that is really important because everybody may have a different way of saying things, but it is important. Your preferences are important. The way, we don't want to be controlling. There's always that thing of, I don't need to control everybody's reactions around me. You can only really control yourself and you only have agency over yourself. And so these are words that I would use, self-agency, self-empowerment, self-authority. These are all words that would be used in self-love. Validating your preferences. This is what I would prefer. And that really opens up, I think we do our deepest work in relationship. And so having a relationship to self is the most important thing to having a relationship to another person.
Okay, so what about this example? Like we're looking in the mirror and body image is a big thing in how we can definitely body shame ourselves. What do we say?
Well, okay, well, that's a good one. That's a good one. Having gone through menopause and my body's changed so much.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, the thing that I love is I like to touch my body. I like to rub my belly. I like to, even sometimes look in the mirror lovingly and just look at the way that I've borne 4 children, the way that I've nursed 4 children and I've fed them, and my body dysmorphia. I've had an eating disorder. I've kind of had a lot of body issues. It's noticing again that negative self-talk because it's such an easy thing to slide into, especially when we're being critical about our physical body and things like that. That's another separating tool. So it's really about, I love my belly. Look at what these things have done. It's a very common thing that is very helpful to notice what's working for us rather than what we don't like. So if we can notice even throughout our lives and our bodies and the way that our bodies are still functional and the ways that we might even have an awareness of that we need to see a doctor for something or we want to have that amount of self-care to go see somebody, it's really about loving each of those parts of you. I think the body stuff is a little bit harder, especially for women, because we're so critical and it's so hard to fight through the stuff that we see just out there all the time and the perfection. So for me, I love my belly. I love my breasts. I love my hips, and just being loving with them. And I think self-pleasure is important too. I really do. I think that the more you can touch yourself and be with yourself and really be in the acceptance of how you are and how you're designed and what you look like. It's a process. It takes time, but you want to just notice the negative thoughts and try to replace them. And before you know it, you'll have more positive things to say about yourself.
I love that. And, another hard one too is when people have a diagnosis or disease in pain, particularly because it does activate the nervous system the moment they feel pain or even sensation for that matter. And then it leads down to a lot of things. We see that quite a bit, even when labs are off. It's interesting that, they get their labs repeated. And when we look at it like this, this looks good because we're looking at the whole thing, but there's just that one thing that went up or down. And it was like, the whole program is a mess now. Like I didn't do well at all when it's like, when you're going through it, it's like, yeah, these things came up. So maybe this is this one thing we need to focus on here that needs a little bit more attention, but the rest of it looks really great. So as far as when somebody comes in with a diagnosis, which they have, or even, chronic ones, cancer, coronary artery disease, something like that. Could you give us, what a scenario would look like doing a self-love practice around that?
I feel that a lot of dis-ease is just from being in a separated state to self. The I love yous are really important, and we can always start with right there, because what happens is we internalize that voice and it goes inward and our body feels it, and we don't necessarily catch the thought that we have that creates the negative emotion that we feel. And a lot of times feeling the negative emotion is the first clue sometimes that you're thinking a negative thought. So Joe Dispenza's work comes to mind. He speaks a lot about noticing the cells, imagining the cells, sending love to the cells, sending healing and golden light and, healing light to those cells or to a certain part of the body, speaking gently and kindly. It's the awareness is the most important thing, because if you're not aware of what you're doing, it's hard to just implement self-love. Those things have to go together. The awareness of how your brain is wired and how you're sending those negative impressions into your cellular structure is the most important thing. So in a sense, if I had a cancer patient in front of me, we would work immediately with self-love and a lot of the inner child work. And I would teach a person how to go inward and to really be kind and gentle, because more than likely they're going to have a story that's connected to pain somewhere, some kind of rejection, some kind of betrayal that they haven't known how to navigate. And if it happens, the earlier it happens in childhood, the more ingrained it is. If it isn't caught and isn't, taken care of. So it's really about taking them back to that primal place even before they got sick.
Definitely. We talk often of how it didn't happen to me as a punishment or as something like that, but it happened for me. So what is the larger picture? Sometimes it's difficult to look at that 30,000 foot view in the moment when your adrenals are going crazy and your nervous system is, running in fight or flight around that. And I think these practices that you're telling us, if that's already established, then that's sort of the go-to that we can be aware of and go deeper into. It's kind of hard in the middle of it, when we don't have this practice already established.
Yeah, I find that self-love, a lot of times people that start the practice of self-love, it's not that they want instant results, even though they do want that, but we're not trying to solve a problem. So much we try to solve problems. We're like, well, I feel sick or I've got this going on and I need a fix. And this is why a lot of people don't take the time for self-love, because it isn't an immediate fix, just like natural medicine or anything isn't an immediate fix. So you're rewiring the neural pathways of your brain so that you're not as negatively focused. The negative focus, I believe, is what creates that disease. So it's really about just being kind and gentle. The thing about it is that, so say, for example, you have a cancer diagnosis. You don't want to focus on how you're going to heal that cancer. You want to send love to the little girl. That's it. That's all you're doing. Because the cancer is something that's a result, perhaps,
yes,
of things that have happened. But you can't unravel it from there. You've got to go in and really, really speak to the little girl that has been struggling to try to keep the body together, has been struggling to try to keep the mind and all the other things working because you're in a fractured state. So a lot of times people will want to really focus on the issue, and fix the issue. And so, for example, say you've got a relationship issue that's coming up and you're wanting to fix the relationship. When you start the self-love practice, you're just sending love to the part of you that's frustrated, the part of you that's angry, the part of you that feels disconnected, the part of you that feels betrayed. You don't want to focus on the other person and why they betrayed you or all the flaws, why they may have done that. You want to just send love to the part of you, the little person that feels betrayed. That's it. It's very simple. This is why we get into our heads too much and then it takes us out of the heart. And what you're trying to do is connect your brain to the heart. And that usually comes through the mouth and the throat. So the communication, speaking the boundaries, what we need, how we feel can be important, because when we can speak it out loud about how we feel inside, we can start to heal. It's when we stuff it all down that we get all that repression and all that separation.
Thank you. Rob, is there anything you'd like to ask?
No, I mean, that was all really fascinating. And for me, it just gives a lot of objective, I guess you could say, especially when people are on this physical journey. And a lot of times we say we're trying to, make them stronger physiologically through their health for the next step that's ahead. But what I'm seeing is like self-love is that tool that can be with us along the way, because it offers that support in so many different areas.
Yeah, what I have found is self-love actually has helped me to be more consistent and to stick with programs where before I would give up.
That makes sense. That really makes sense. And when you talk about a healing crisis, like what happens then, right? So that's perfect for that. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And so it's just you almost have to be radical in the way that you just show up all the time for yourself, all the time. It can't be, I have people that I work with that will hit a plateau and they'll feel like, well, it didn't work for me. No, you're ready to go to the next level. That's what's going on. So you're ready to go deeper, because sometimes when we begin with the surface stuff. Maybe it's a relationship or a breakup or a diagnosis or something that's completely spun us out, and you'll start there. But inevitably, when you do the practice, you'll go deeper and deeper till you get to the root cause of what has created all of it in the first place. And I just find that it's really important. I notice a lot of people that aren't able to do self-love work, or they haven't done it so far, and they can get to a certain level, then they can't get beyond it because they're not connecting to the inner part of the self. So I've been able to be a lot more consistent and have been able to really maintain a pretty wonderful amount of health, despite some interesting diagnosis and family history and all kinds of things. And we just become happier. You're just, when you create those spaces for yourself and you've got peace in your life and you're not in a constant torment with yourself, life changes. You can do more things. You're more curious. You're more playful. You're willing to take risks. So it just improves us on so many different levels.
Wonderful. Lynnette, we can talk to you all day long.
Well, it's so great to see you guys again. I'm so happy about your new endeavors, and this podcast is just wonderful. I'm so happy to see it come to fruition for you guys.
Thank you. Are there any final messages about self-love you'd like to share with our audience?
Do it. Just do it. If you need support, go and check out Matt Kahn. He's a wonderful resource. He's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. He's very spiritual, and there may be things that you don't understand, but he is going to explain a lot of the process. Just do it. Don't wait. Don't wait another day. Don't wait another day. Your inner child is begging to be connected to you. Your little child is frantic in a way to connect with you and to communicate with you so that you can understand yourself on a deeper level. And you deserve it. You deserve to have that full connection with yourself, and you deserve to have full access to all that you are and all that you can be. And you deserve to be loved and cherished. And when you start doing that with yourself, it just will improve your relationship so much. The most important relationship you have is to yourself. So don't wait. Don't feel like you can't do it. It's free. It's free. And you can do it at your own pace. And there's no reason not to start.
You have a self-love course as well, correct?
I do. I do have a self-love course, yes. And you can find me on Instagram at Oracle of Your Soul. And I have a link in my bio for my self-love course. And it's just 19 or 20 little videos that are going to walk you through how I do it. And I'm upgrading that all the time. So you've got access to that, and that's free as well.
And we'll link that in the show notes. So thank you so much.
The thing I love about self-love too, that I'll just say in closing, is that you'll notice it right away. You'll notice the difference right away. The more that you start loving yourself, and the sooner you start, the sooner you're going to feel better. And you're going to have a lot of revelations and realizations that are going to help you to put pieces together that are finally going to allow you to move forward in life. So don't wait. Do it now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Soul of Medicine podcast, where science meets soul for whole health healing. Are you ready to reclaim your energy, vitality, and soul purpose? Then feel free to head to our website at kcorpusmd.com and schedule an appointment for your root cause review.